This is Canine Turbo Training's Ask the Trainer, what can I do with my energetic dog? I'm Laura Maihofer. I prepared a small presentation for us, and the main goal here though is to answer your questions. So at any point, if you have any questions, please feel free to jump in. This webinar is all about what we can do with our energetic dogs. So you might have a dog who's super hyper and now you're stuck at home a little bit more than usual with them. Our routines have changed a little bit in the last week and will be changed for a few weeks. So this, I think, is going to be a really nice, timely webinar to help you out if you have a dog who's going just a little bit stir crazy with all these changes. To start out, I want to talk about arousal control. So our energetic dogs are really excited a lot of the time. They might have some anxiety that's causing them to be a little bit extra energetic, or they might just love life. If you have a younger dog, a puppy, maybe a teenage puppy, it's likely that they're going to be super excited about a lot of different things that you introduce them to. New places you go, new things you do. They are going to be pumped up for all of that. Now, as we're working with our energetic dogs, it's important for them to learn how to maintain arousal control. And arousal control just means you can get excited and you can calm down. Some of our dogs get amped up, they get real excited, and they don't know how to bring themselves down from that. So if you have one of those dogs, it's going to be important to start working with them on how to calm down after the excited time. We like to balance our physical and mental exercise. So we're not just going to do running, playing, burning the energy. There's an old adage that a tired dog is a good dog, and we do see that often in the short term. Our dogs run and play, and then they're tired and they're quiet, and it feels good to us. But one of the things about running our dogs until they're so tired they're not behaving as much is we can end up with a dog who gets stronger and stronger and needs more exercise every day. So it might take more work to get them to that point next week or next month. So as we're thinking about arousal control, teaching our dogs to get excited and then to calm down, we do so by alternating between activities. So we can start with something that's a little exciting, like a game of fetch, and you could ask for short, easy behaviors between repetitions of that high arousal game. For example, here in this photo, you can see my friend who is also named Laura and Toff, who's a super fun, sweet puppy, playing fetch. Now Laura has held up the stick and asked Toff to sit between repetitions of throwing that stick, so that Toff is able to actually think a little bit between repetitions. Without asking for any behaviors in between, the dog is just running, 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 fetching, 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 fetching. And it can feel really good and they can be really amped about it and excited about it. But it's harder for them to calm down after something so stimulating. Whereas if we add in these little behaviors for the dog to do, they can learn how to think a little bit while they're playing. So when we come down from the game, it's going to be easier for them to switch back into a thinking mode as opposed to just an excited mode. Now, when we're adding in behaviors between repetitions of a high arousal game, we want to make sure we start really, really easy for the dog. Because when a dog is in a high arousal state, it is going to be much harder for them to respond, and they might be a little frustrated the first time we ask them to do something if they're used to just running and fetching, bringing it back, running and fetching, bringing it back, running and fetching, bringing it back. So I usually will start with something that is a really fun behavior for the dog. So one of their favorite things. If you've taught them how to target your hand with their nose, this can be a really good one because it just involves them touching your hand real quick and then they can get another round of fetch. Here, Toff's sitting. This is a behavior she's practiced a lot of times And the first time Laura asked for it here, she actually rewarded Toph for trying. I like to call it reinforcing effort. Toph kind of lowered her butt a little bit, and my friend was like, yes, good, and threw the stick because she tried. And that way we avoid building frustration into the game. Now, additionally, it's good to reinforce calm behaviors. And we'll talk about this more a little later in the slideshow. But the idea is that we're going to reward our dogs for those behaviors we like. And with our high energy dogs, especially as we're maybe spending a little bit more time with them right now, we don't get a lot of calm behaviors sometimes. If it's pretty rare for your dog to just lay down at your feet, when they do, it's really going to benefit you to give them a treat or to give them some praise when they do lay down. And we'll talk more about this at the end, because we're going to go through now this inverted triangle of activity. So the inverted triangle of activity is a strategy for helping dogs control arousal, are excited, energetic individuals. This was first presented to me at the Midwest Veterinary Conference at Ohio State by Dr. Leanne Lilly, and she presented this in a presentation on compulsive behaviors. So dogs who do things like spin in circles repeatedly, or dogs who chase shadows or chase lights. And the idea was to help those dogs calm down from that state. But we also find it can be very useful for our high excitement, high arousal, energetic dogs. So if you have a dog who you play with outside, and then you come in and you want to sit down and relax, and your dog cannot, they just want to play more, they want to do more activity, let's be more excited, let's keep playing, this inverted triangle of activity is going to be very beneficial to you. Now, the idea is we start with a high energy, high arousal game, something like running or another physical activity. And then we do something like training, slightly calmer, thinking a little bit more. And you can alternate these activities like we discussed before. Then we go into some calm attention from the person. So this could be petting, it could be a really calm hands-on game, or it could be some training where we have our dog working with us. And then we have enrichment. And specifically, Dr. Lilly described food dispensing toys that the dog can engage with independently. The idea behind this is, again, for the dog to taper their arousal level down so that they go from very active to calm and relaxed. Now, so physical exercise. Physical exercise is definitely a piece of the puzzle of what we want to do with our energetic dogs, but it's not all of the puzzle. Physical exercise is fantastic, and it's highly recommended for your dog. This puppy right here is Tina. This is my sister's dog, and she was out on a hike. And you can see she's really happy about hiking. This hiking makes her day. But hiking is only a piece of what we do to help this energetic pup have a really great day. Now, if you focus in on that physical exercise, let's get the dog physically tired, you can accidentally build what we call a super athlete. So I mentioned before, a dog who needs more and more and more physical activity to be calm and happy and satiated. Now, I always think of myself when I'm talking about a super athlete, not because I am a super athlete. By no means am I a super athlete. But I do go through phases of more physical activity. Typically during the summer, I might start jogging consistently. And what tends to happen is if I start jogging consistently, on a day that I don't jog, I feel really pent up. I'm kind of a little bit more antsy, a little bit more anxious. I want to go do something. And just working at a computer that I might be doing doesn't meet that. It doesn't fit that bill. Because at this point, my body is used to repeated physical exercise. So unless you really want a dog who wants that daily physical hard work, then we want to be cautious about building super athletes. If you do want a super athlete in your home, if you are athletic, if you love to work, love to run, love to do physical activities, then here's just a little list of some that we really love to do with our dogs. So hiking is my favorite. I love to hike with dogs. I love to go explore new parks, explore nature areas with the dogs, and we'll talk about snifaris and good times to sniff and explore a little later on. But other things you can do are running or biking with your dog. There are adjustments you can make to bikes and parts you can buy to attach your dog's leash to the bike in a way that will not tangle under a wheel. It's very important that if you're doing an on-leash biking trip, you have some sort of attachment so that your leash does not accidentally get caught under the wheel. Now, other really fun physical activities to do with your dog are dog sports. And there's a lot of these, and they're very widespread now. So just a few are agility, where your dog is going to be doing quick turns and big jumps and running through tunnels. Agility is a very competitive sport. So if you have a competitive side, you'd like to train and work and compete and show all of the progress you've made, agility can be a really great one. Fly ball is another great sport, as well as disc games, where the dog has to actually catch something in midair. You do a real strong throw, the dog has to run and catch that all in midair. Really beautiful, and some of our athletic dogs can show off their strength in these games. And another one of our favorites is lure coursing. So you can find lure coursing at different activities. Often these are available at places like pet expos, but you can find lure courses all around the country. And this is where there is a track with a fake prey animal. So usually it's some sort of stuffed animal. Sometimes it's even just a towel. And it's on a mechanical run. It moves very quickly. And your dog's job is just to chase it, to keep pace with that. Lure coursing can be really, really fun for our dogs who have a strong predatory drive, who like to chase animals outside. And then we have joring. Joring is another really fun sport. Joring means pulling. So any sort of joring is where your dog pulls you in action. You can do joring just with running. So you can get a certain kind of harness. Typically there's an X-back harness, which is going to distribute the dog's weight in such a way that it's not going to put any pressure on the joints or on the neck, so that your dog can actually pull full force. You can get a waist leash that attaches around your waist that's going to buffer some of the pull, so that you can go running with your dog and have them pull you. You can also do joring with anything on wheels. So you can go bike joring or ski joring or kart joring. Now, I know skis don't have wheels. I'm sure you could go rollerblade joring. Anything you have that your dog can pull you on is a great thing to give them some physical exercise. But again, we want proper equipment for this. So a setup for the bike so that your dog is able to pull without the risk of that leash going under the wheels. A setup for the cart for the same reason. And when skiing, having the particular waist leash that goes around so that you're not going to get harmed by your arm being yanked. And the right equipment for the dog. So a harness that allows them to pull full force without injury. There are lots of other physical exercises you can do. I just wanted to highlight a few of these that involve our dogs really burning energy. All right. Playing games is absolutely my favorite thing to do with dogs. We created a whole class on games because it's just so fun. And I wanted to show you a few videos of dogs playing some of our favorite games. So here is just a very simple predatory game called Catch. And she's actually just catching treats.
Ready? Um,
But this simple act of catching a treat in the air allows the dog to go through pieces of the predatory sequence, which we'll talk a little bit more about after these next videos. So here is a very fun game called Tag Touch. And this is me and Janora playing. Janora is my dog. The entire idea is just that your dog chases down and touches your hand. And this is a very short clip. We had some technical issues, but I love seeing her running. Janora is older and has quite a bit of anxiety, and she doesn't run all that often. But touch is one of the few games she will run for. And then lastly, a very short clip on agility. That's Toph. This is when she was a lot younger, and she actually was learning how to jump for the first time. So predatory games take part of the predatory sequence, a natural sequence of behaviors dogs will do when hunting. This involves orienting towards prey, stalking, chasing, grabbing, dissecting, all of these really fun things for our dogs that we might not want them practicing on real live animals. For example, we just got chickens. I really don't want my dog to practice predatory play with the chickens. So by giving an outlet for these behaviors, we can teach the dog that there are better prey than chickens. The flirt pole, for example, is like a cat toy for dogs. You get a big PVC pipe and you can run a rope through it and attach a tug toy at the end. And then you can swing that around so your dog has to chase it down. One thing to keep in mind is that quick turns can be hard on the joints. So I'm cautious if the dog is older and has any sort of arthritis to not make really fast turns with this. We also don't want to do too high of jumps so that our dog jumps up and then slams hard into the ground. But the flirt pole can be a really fun activity to help get out some of the dog's predatory needs. Tug is probably my absolute favorite. I love tugging with dogs. For a really long time, trainers would tell you not to tug with dogs because it was thought that it could cause dogs to become aggressive. As it turns out, tugging does not increase aggression, but it can raise arousal. So again, we want to keep in mind our arousal control as we tug. When playing tug with a dog, I like to have a few rules. My first rule is bite the toy, not my hands. If the dog bites my hand, I'm just going to drop the toy and not play for a second. I'll re-engage in a moment, but I don't want to reinforce that behavior of biting onto my hand. Another rule I have is that humans actually have relatively weak noodle arms. So these things are not as strong as you. So if you want to keep playing tug, you're going to need to play at a level that's not super, super strong. I do like to let the dog get a few good tugs in, but if the dog tugs real strong, I'm going to let them win. They're going to get that toy out of my hand. So that if they want to keep playing, keep tugging, they're going to have to modify the strength that they use. By modifying the strength they use, they're learning how to have this arousal control, this impulse control. I can't pull too hard or I'll pull it right out of the human's arms. So if I want to keep playing, I have to pull at a certain level so that we're still in this together. I also will typically train a few behaviors around tug, such as a take it cue. So the dog has a cue that means you should take this out of my hands. That will help reduce some of that instance of accidentally biting your hand. And I also like to teach drop. So if the dog is tugging along, I could cue them to drop that toy. Or after the dog gets a good tug, I could cue them to drop the toy so I could pick it back up. For the most part, when playing tug specifically, I am going to let the dog choose when to play this game. So I want them to run back and re-engage with me. Bring me that toy. Shove the toy into my hands to play. This is a really good way to make tug really cooperative. Your dog genuinely wants to play. You know that we're not taking a toy and they're thinking it's competition. They've brought it to you. They want help. Now, tug is part of our predatory games because it actually simulates that dissecting part. We're actually working together to tear apart this toy. And then fetch and catch, like you saw our little puppy up top doing. Fetch is really great because your dog's going to be able to chase down and grab something. They might shake the toy or the ball after they get it, which is part of that predatory sequence. Fetch is super fun, but in order to keep the dog's arousal not through the roof, I tend to add in those behaviors in between. Teaching the dog to drop the toy when they bring it back. Teaching the dog to sit and wait for me to pick that toy up. And then to go get the toy when I cue them to. And then catch is a super fun kind of mini game I love to play. Just tossing a treat or tossing the ball to your dog. Having them catch something that you've tossed to them can be a really good reinforcer as well. So if you're trying to get a slightly higher arousal behavior when you're training, tossing the treat will help increase your dog's excitement around that behavior. And then agility. We saw Toph do this tiny little jump that was actually at an apartment dog park where there weren't any other dogs. They have some agility equipment and we were playing on it. But you can actually make a lot of your own agility equipment if you're a little bit savvy with your equipment. So you can make jumps as well as the weave poles out of PVC pipes. So weave poles are just posts that are in the ground that the dog zigzags between. Agility is all about these quick turns, moving fast, changing directions quickly. Because of these quick turns, it's important that your dog is in good physical fitness in order to do competitive agility, competitive even. And we don't want to have young puppies taking part in this because young puppies' growth plates are not going to be fully fused until they're about a year of age. So the quick turns can put pressure on those joints to the point that it can be painful and it can cause issues with growth. Now, same thing to consider with our older arthritic dogs. With Janora, she's got some arthritis. So we practice really small versions of agility type games. In order to keep her joints loose and able to move, but not to stress them. So I might have her do 2 little turns around some cones, a really, really wide weave, so that she's practicing continuing to turn her joints, but we're not doing that intense physical pressure. But for your highly energetic dogs, having to practice these turns is going to have them both thinking and moving quickly and physically. Now, you can also make things like an A-frame for your dog. So an A-frame is simply a ramp that goes 2 ways. The dog can walk up one side and then walk down the other side. Sounds easy, but it can be quite a challenge for your dogs. And that challenge is what's going to burn quite a bit of energy. So even if you're moving slowly, just doing some kind of fun novice agility, your dog is going to be thinking the whole time, what's the next move? What should I do now? Which direction do I go? And that thought process actually burns energy, just like if you work at the computer. Now, I mentioned here there are some agility kits as well. Outward Hound has a, I believe, $30 indoor agility kit. It's a little small if you have a large dog, but I find it super fun to use with smaller dogs. And it does have a relatively large tunnel in it. And the tunnel allows the dog to just experience something new. which we'll talk about, I believe, in a couple upcoming slides. Another fun way to play games with your dog is through recess style games. So you saw Janora playing touch tag with me. Touch tag is one of my favorite recess style games because your dog is going to be chasing after you to run over and touch your hand. Whenever your dog is chasing you, you're actually building up a recall behavior. So if you have a dog who's not great at coming when you call them, playing tag can be a great way to build a really strong recall. Your dog can learn that if you put your hand out, it's going to be so fun to run over to you. And we like to reinforce with a tasty treat once they've done it. And hide and seek can be a really great game too. I remember playing this when I was a kid with my dogs growing up, where I would just hide all over the house and call the dog, and their job was to find me. This game also builds a really strong recall because your dog is practicing finding you when you're out of sight. When playing this game, we start really small, so I might just go into a different room and call the dog, so they practice coming and finding me when I'm out of sight. And if they have any trouble locating me, I'll use high-pitched repeating notes to help them track me down. I think of it kind of like bat sonar. Your dog is going to be listening for the sounds to come follow you and find you. But you can also play this game with toys. So you could teach your dog the name of a toy and then start to hide that toy around the house for your dog to find. That game can be super fun, and it's a mental challenge not only in seeking out that toy, but it also requires sniffing, and it's going to require your dog to remember which toy is which. And then there's sandbox games. So these can be super fun. If you have a dog who loves to dig, and they're getting all their physical exercise out in the backyard right now, digging big trenches that cause you to trip, my favorite technique is to build them a sandbox. And you don't have to go out to the store and actually buy a box and fill it with sand. What you can do is just block off a square or a section of your yard. Usually you want it to be at least 3 feet by 3 feet, especially if you have a slightly larger dog, so they have room to put their whole body in and get some good digging going. You can break up the soil with a spade, and then you can start to hide new toys or treats in that area. I found that most dogs aren't going to start digging there until they see you dig there a little bit. So I like to get them going by doing a little digging with my hands and then encouraging the dog to dig in that location. Then if you have a problem with your dog digging anywhere else, you just encourage them over to the sandbox. Hey buddy, this is the place to dig. Look, I just found a toy. Wow, that's amazing. Can you find it now? And then for our high energy dogs who also love to herd, if you have an Australian cattle dog or a shepherd or a corgi, you might know all about herding behaviors. Your dog might practice coming up behind you, circling around you, nipping the back of your heel to get you exactly where they want you to go. Those behaviors are super natural for your dog. It's healthy for them to practice them, but it might not be super fun for you to experience them nipping at the back of your legs. So you can have them practice these behaviors with an outlet that you're okay with. For example, there's a behavior called go around, where you teach your dog to actually go out and around an object. This is a really fun behavior, and you can teach them to go around anything. So I know some dogs who know people's names, and you can send them to go out around that specific person, even in motion. Now, if you're teaching go around, I usually will start by rewarding the dog as they start to make a turn around the specific object. So you could use a treat lure or a hand target to guide them around at first, and mark as they make that turn, then feed while they're on the way back to you. We actually have a really nice little tutorial on go around in our Facebook challenge, which I'm going to talk about a little later as we're thinking about other things you can do to keep your dog mentally and physically stimulated. And then finally, there's this game called Tri-Ball. So Tri-Ball is where your dog actually herds around a really big ball. And you can use like an exercise ball for this, or we use just soccer balls sometimes with the dogs. But you teach them to actually push it with their nose. And then once they learn how to push it with their nose, you teach them to push it with their nose in specific directions. And there are some really good tutorials on teaching Tri-Ball on YouTube. So if you search it, you can find some step-by-steps on how to teach your dog to herd a ball in a specific direction. So, social time. We've done a lot of physical activity, and now we're moving on to some social time. Oh, there's a great question from Rachel. How do you teach them to go through the tunnel? That's a good question, and it sort of depends on your dog. So for some dogs, the tunnel is going to be scary naturally. It's a strange new object. It might be colorful. A lot of them are different colors. The one I have is bright orange, and I also have a bright pink one. But what we want to do is first teach our dog that this object is safe. So for example, I might have the tunnel not unfolded first, show the dog the tunnel, feed them a treat. Show them the tunnel, feed them a treat. Then I might take that tunnel farther away from the dog and unfold it or unroll it so it expands, if you have an expandable tunnel, and reward the dog for seeing it. Then I'm going to reward any exploration towards it. So moving towards the tunnel, looking at the tunnel, sniffing the tunnel, all those behaviors, I want to tell the dog that is what I like. So I'll say, good, or yes, each time the dog moves in the direction of the tunnel, and I'll feed them a treat away from the tunnel. And the treat actually going away from the tunnel is really important because it's going to give your dog a moment to reset, get a little relief if they're a little nervous of that tunnel, and then it gives them that opportunity to go back towards the tunnel so that you can mark the motion, the action of going towards the tunnel. Now, if your dog is not afraid of the tunnel, I might toss a ball through it to see if they offer that behavior of going through, or I might just watch them as they explore the tunnel and mark any moment that they actually enter it with their body. If there are two people with the dog, one of you could have the dog on leash on the far side of the tunnel, and the other could recall the dog through the tunnel by putting their body on the other side and calling the dog, hey Fluffy, come here. When the dog comes through, we could throw a party, we could have them play with a tug toy, we could toss a treat to help build a little arousal into running through the tunnel. I have on occasion actually climbed into the tunnel myself and encouraged the dog to move in towards me, but I'll only do that with a dog who's not really afraid of the tunnel, just doesn't know what to do with it, and who really likes me. So they're like, oh, Laura's in the tunnel. I want to go in the tunnel with Laura. If the dog is afraid of the tunnel, I really am cautious not to lure them in. Because if we put a bunch of treats inside the tunnel for them to come and sniff and just eat one at a time, the dog is likely to learn that the tunnel or those treats are a trap. So I toss a treat into the tunnel. Nervous dog is gonna go, nope, thanks. I don't want that treat. In fact, I don't think I'm gonna eat chicken anymore because chicken predicts tunnels. I don't like that. So I wanna set it up so that the dog is offering behavior. Maybe they take one cautious step towards it. I'm gonna reward the action. So that action forward, yes, good. And I'm gonna toss food away so that they can choose to re-engage. It can sometimes be a multi-day process. You might not get the dog running through the tunnel day one, but it's worth it to take your time if the dog is nervous of that. And it can actually build a lot of confidence to introduce them to that new thing and let them choose to engage with it. Now, another thing to keep in mind, if you have the tunnel on a slippery floor or if the tunnel itself tends to move, you might want to weight it down or even tack it down with stakes so that it doesn't move when the dog steps in. One way to take a dog from being kind of cautiously optimistic to genuinely scared is for them to step into the tunnel and the tunnel to all move around them. You can use things like sandbags to hold the tunnel down if you put those on either side. I will sometimes physically hold the tunnel myself as well, just to make sure that it's not going to move when my cautious dogs are finally getting up the nerve to go inside of it. I hope that answered your question, Rachel. If you have any additional ones on the tunnel or on anything else, feel free to raise your hand or to type a question into the chat box. Oh, is there a cue to get them to go through? So I might teach a cue once the dog is performing the behavior. So anytime I'm teaching the dog a new cue, I need to have the behavior first, and then I can name it. Because the words themselves will have no meaning to the dog until we tell them what it is. So going through the tunnel first, then once the dog is running through the tunnel, I could name that. Most people I've talked to have just used the word tunnel. In a lot of competitive agility, the dog is actually going to be following body cues more so than verbal cues, but tunnel is a really good one for it. You could also name it in. If your dog already has a cue for going into something, such as going into a crate or into the house through door, you could use that same cue as long as the tunnel appears to be similar to thresholds they've practiced that cue with. So if it looks completely different, it's super round, it kind of moves around a little bit, it doesn't look like, say, a car door that your dog knows the word in for, I don't want to name it the same thing, because to the dog, it could be a completely different behavior. But the fun thing about training is you can actually name any behavior anything you want to a dog. They're learning English as a second language, so you don't actually have to stick to any sort of set cues for anything. The word sit has no meaning to a dog until we pair it with the behavior. Really awesome questions. Oh, good, you're gonna try it tomorrow. That's great, I love that. All right, so the next thing I like to do is social time. Social time can burn a lot of energy, but I'm not just talking about rough and tumble play. So for some of our dogs, they're amped up all the time, and they might get super amped up when they see other dogs. It can be best to have your social time at a distance. And especially right now, because we actually have some social distancing rules in place because of the pandemic that we're going through. So here I have a photo of myself and Janora going on a buddy walk with our good friends Kate and Della. You can see we're about 10-15 feet apart, far enough away to not breathe on each other, and far enough away for Janora to be comfortable. Because any closer to a dog, she would be a bit uncomfortable, anxious at the very least. She's afraid of other dogs, but she actually really likes them once she learns that she doesn't have to go up and interact. So here you can see her super, super happy to be relaxing just 15 feet away from another dog. And this was after we ran all around a field and sniffed and explored together. So a great way to go get some social time is to go on a buddy walk. Take your dog out with a friend at a far distance. Feed your dog treats for seeing that other dog. If they try and pull towards them, just encourage them to walk in a different direction. Let's go this way. And take a walk at a distance apart. You can slowly decrease that distance as your dog's relaxing and getting more comfortable and realizing that we're not going to go charging over and say hi. And you can do the same thing with human friends as well. So if you want to go on a walk with a human friend, but your dog gets super amped up whenever they greet people, take a walk at a distance together. Feed your dog treats for seeing that person. Let your dog sniff and explore and go anywhere they want, aside from directly at that person. If they start to go directly towards the person, encourage them to go sniff something off to the side. And I like to do that with a verbal cue. If the dog starts to pull towards them, I just stand still and I wait for them to make the choice to go any other direction. Any other direction, you're gonna get treats from me. You're gonna get praise from me, and I'm gonna encourage you to go sniff that log over there because there's probably some good smells on the log. Now, play dates can be a really good way too. So if you have a very social dog who really likes other dogs, you could do a play date. I do these in two different ways. Right now, I recommend all play be what's called parallel play, where we actually have a barrier between the dogs so that if something went wrong, we didn't have to get right next to each other to do any sort of separation. For example, if you have two dogs who tend to play really, really excited, very, very aroused, maybe they're wrestling and wrestling and wrestling, and that's all they do. setting up a barrier between them and encouraging them to play with things like toys or to play with you while seeing the other dog around can help them build a less competitive relationship, as well as set it up so that there's no risk of us having to go in there and separate them. But if you have two dogs who like to play really well together, they run around, they're loose and relaxed, they take breaks, they check in with you, they read each other's body language, there's no signs of aggression between them or growling or snapping, then free play can be another good way to burn some of their energy. I usually will keep play to about 30 minutes or an hour. If the dogs are really comfortable with each other, they will usually rest during play, and then we could have play continue a little longer. But if the dogs are just playing the whole time, we want to make sure we don't have them go for extended periods of time. 2 hours of play with no break is a lot of physical exercise, and you're looking at a super athlete coming down the line there. 2 hours without breaks also tells me that the dogs are likely competing a bit. They might be having fun, they might really enjoy each other's presence, but it sounds a bit like hockey to me, where it's a little bit rough and tumble, kind of intense, we're not relaxing, we're just playing. So in order to keep our arousal under control, breaks are really important. And if you have any questions about play, I did do an Ask the Trainer webinar maybe a month or two ago on play that is up on our YouTube channel. And then we've talked about playing with human friends. Training is another really good way to engage with a dog socially. So if you have a dog, like my dog, who doesn't actually do a lot of play herself, she's an older individual, she doesn't know what play is, but she does get energetic sometimes. Working the brain and training with them can be a really good way to burn some of that energy. And we'll talk about that in a future slide. And then petting sessions. So as we think about that inverted triangle of activity, petting sessions can help bring a dog down from a high arousal state. But I want the petting session to be consensual. So I'm not going to go over and pet the dog if they're moving away from me. I'm going to encourage them to come in towards me, pet for a little while and then step back and let them come in towards me again, pet for a little while, then step back and let them come in towards me again, so that I know the dog really likes that and wants me to be petting them. For some dogs, when they're excited, petting is not what they're interested in. So if you have a really hyped up, excited dog, you might have to do some training and some other things first to bring the arousal down to a point where they might actually enjoy petting. I think of it like trying to get a back massage while you really want to be going on a run instead. You might not really be feeling that at the moment. So I want to be checking in with the dog, making sure that they want that time. Now we're going to talk about mental exercise. Trick training. Trick training can be super fun. And here you see our sweet friend. I was introduced to this puppy's name just a little bit earlier, and I will come up with his name soon. He is doing Paws Up, which is a really, really fun game that you can play with your dog, where you teach them to step up onto a box. Alistair. This dog's name is Alistair. So Alistair is showing off his skills, stepping up onto a box. He's actually performing this, going along with our Facebook training challenge. So because we know a lot of people are stuck at home, a lot of antsy dogs really want to be working right now, we introduced your dog's favorite training challenge. So there's a trick a day that you can teach your dog, as well as an enrichment object a day. And this is also available on our YouTube channel, so you can go through and see the videos of presenting how to teach these things. There are tons of training challenges out there right now. Lots of trainers are doing video training. They're showing different kinds of tricks you can teach your dog. So take a look around. Find something that sounds really fun to you, and you could do all sorts of different tricks with your dog. I love tricks because not only does it work the dog's brain, but it's really fun, and you end up with something that you can kind of show off. Now, another way to get mental exercise is through novelty. So Rachel, when you go and you do the tunnel with your dog, you are probably introducing something novel, a new thing, something they haven't experienced a lot of. One of my favorite ways to get novelty is to go to new locations. So one of the ways that we've been getting through this pandemic shutdown is by going to new parks. We drive around and we find new parks every day that don't have any people or other dogs around, and we sniff and explore. And my dog is in charge of where we go. She gets to go all over the park, discover all different things. We're staying off play structures because those are closed right now. But she gets to explore brand new places. And now she is an insecure dog, a little bit nervous. She's only been with me about a year and she's an adult. So going out and finding new places, having her be in charge of where we go builds her confidence. And sometimes she'll go out and she'll just sniff maybe 50 paces from the car, and then she wants to get back in the car. So we get back in the car. I'm letting her make the choice of how much of that experience she has so that she can be really confident about the exploration she does. Now, seeing new objects or smells is also a great way to build novelty. Simple thing I like to do is just let my dog sniff things. So if I have a random new thing, a new box that I got that I've emptied out, my dog gets to sniff it. There's some sort of smell on everything. Everything smells. And our dog's primary sense is their sense of smell. So by letting them go out and explore with their noses, they're going to be burning a lot of mental exercise. And we're going to actually talk about different ways to utilize sniffing and their noses in an upcoming slide. And discrimination. So discrimination is kind of a type of trick training where we actually teach the dog to identify different things. So you can teach your dog to identify different colors. Typically, we'll use blue and yellow for this because our dogs have diconic eyes instead of triconic, which means they can see blue and yellow really well, but they can't see the red-green spectrum as well. So you could describe them as red-green colorblind. If you show them a red object and a green object, those are going to look like different shades of gray to them. But if you show them a blue object and a yellow object, they can see that quite clearly. They can tell what blue is and what yellow is. And we can teach it to them by just naming those colors. So I like to do this by presenting one color first and making sure the dog knows how to target that object. So if I were to teach yellow, I might use this yellow tennis ball. I could show the dog the tennis ball and we'll have Fluffy demo. If Fluffy came over and sniffed it, I would say yes and feed a treat. I want Fluffy to come to the ball, yes, instead of me bringing the ball to Fluffy. Fluffy's not real. You might have noticed. After the dog is good at targeting this, they know how to say this one or this one. Then I will start to name it, yellow, and present it for them to touch. The word yellow can become a cue to target that object. Then all I need is an identical object that is blue. So if I had a blue ball, I would put the yellow one away, I'd teach the same behavior with the blue ball, and I name it blue. When they know blue, I might have yellow way out here in the background, but I'll ask for blue. They can target blue, and they can start to discriminate between blue and yellow. This is super fun to do. It's a big mental challenge for dogs who have never learned a skill like this, differentiating between two things. So I take my time with it. I might have one whole session where I'm just teaching yellow on its own. I might have one whole session where I'm just teaching blue on its own. I might take a few sessions to have yellow far away asking for blue repeatedly and slowly bringing yellow closer and closer. But what I want is for the dog to be 100% successful. We call this errorless learning. When we're teaching discrimination, errorless learning is really important so the dog truly understands what those words mean. Yellow always means this color. Blue always means the other color. Now you can do this also with toy names. So if you have a variety of toys for your dog, you can teach them the names of those objects. Oftentimes I'll teach this by saying a word such as ball, then showing them the object and playing with them in a way that they like to play with that object. Then I might start to say things like, get your ball, and toss the ball for the dog to go get. Then I'll take a different toy. Maybe this one is rope. And I'll say rope, and then I'll play with the rope the way they like to play with the rope. I'll start to build up to get your rope and toss the rope for them to go get. And then I'll start to have the ball on the scene while I'm cueing the rope. But I want to make sure, again, that the dog is seamlessly getting this right. If at any point they start to go for the wrong toy, I just make it easier by really engaging with the one that I asked for, or by removing the one that I didn't ask for. And you can also teach this with smells, which we'll talk about a little bit more on the next slide. So the last mental exercise I really want to talk about is this game called Do As I Do. This is a mimicry game, and you can actually teach your dog all sorts of behaviors using mimicry. So Do As I Do is simply a game where we teach the dog that whatever behavior I do, I want you to do. And you can start with any 3 to 5 behaviors that your dog knows. So for example, sit, lay down, paw. You could do paws up, like our buddy over here is doing. You could do touch. And then what we're gonna do is we're going to make sure our dog knows how to sit and look at us. So have your dog sit and look at you. Often you'll cue this as watch me. And then you're gonna just perform the behavior you want your dog to do. You could sit down. Then you can stand up and you can say, do it, and cue them to sit. When they sit, we reward them. We pair us sitting, then cueing them, do it, and cue them to sit. And they learn the behavior you're doing is what I'm doing. After we've practiced with one behavior, we can do the same thing with a different behavior. We can say, sit, watch me. You can lay down on the ground, stand up, do it, and then cue your dog to lay down. We want to be consistent, so whatever behavior we do is the behavior we then ask our dog to do. Now, if your treats are high value and they really like them and they want to work for it, the dog's brain is designed to jump ahead, to figure out how to get that food faster. So over time, what can happen is we start to say, sit, watch me. They watch us. We do a behavior, such as laying down, then say, do it. You can pause a moment and see if your dog's going to jump ahead and do the behavior before you cue it. This mimicry game is so fun, and it's relatively new because for a long time, we didn't know that dogs could learn a concept like this. It does take quite a bit of brain work for the dog to figure out the concept. So this is a great thing to do with our energetic dogs to help them start to harness some of these skills, some of their mental aptitude. Now we're going to talk about nose work and puzzles in our next few slides. But these mental exercises are great for helping bring our dog's energy down and burn some of it without having that arousal go through the roof. So, nose work. Sniffing and nose work are so fun. As I mentioned, I love taking my dog out to natural places and letting her just sniff around. So just sniffing, we like to call a sniffari. You go out and your dog's nose is your guide. You go wherever their nose goes and they get to sniff everything. This can be super, super fun. I like to take them places where I know there's not going to be dangerous things for them to sniff. Or I want to make sure that I can really trust the dog, that I know that they're not going to pick up and eat things off the ground. Now, when we go out on snifaris, I sometimes will hide food or treats for them to find. So as we go out and they're sniffing, I can find a specific location and I could say, find it, and encourage them to sniff that location, and they can find a particular smell or treat that I've already left there. That can be super, super fun way to get your dog really thinking and using their nose. Now, find it is a really simple version of a nose work game. And you can play this just by saying, find it, and then tossing some treats on the ground for your dog to find. This is one of my go-tos. It's super simple, it's really fun, and your dog is practicing the natural behaviors of sniffing and searching for food, which is a calming activity to dogs. Now, as your dog gets really good with some of the simple sniffing games, you can start to make it a little more difficult for them. So, for example, you can teach your dog to track a scent. And one of my favorite tools for this is actually kind of a silly thing. It's a Parmesan cheese container that is empty. And one of the reasons why I really like the Parmesan cheese container is because it has a lid with a few little holes in it. So I can put something with a scent in here, for example, a drop of vanilla, or I could put a mint tea bag in here for a few hours and then take the tea bag out and create a scented item that I can then open and close when I'm ready. What we can do then is teach our dog that if you sniff it, you'll get treats. So I'll open up the lid and I'll offer this object a little ways away from the dog. When the dog comes forward to sniff, yes, and I'll feed them a really good treat. They start to learn that sniffing this earns them rewards. Now, I do want to make sure that they're actually sniffing, not just touching it with their nose. So I'm going to listen for the sound of sniffing, or I'm going to watch their nose to make sure the edges of their nose are flaring, that they're really bringing that scent in. I'm cautious not to use anything that could be an irritant for the dog. So things like cinnamon, I might use a cinnamon stick and then remove it. And things like mint, I'm going to be cautious to make sure the dog is okay with that smell. Some smells your dog's going to like more than others, but I found that vanilla tends to be a really good one to start out with. Fish oil is a really powerful smell that you can have your dog track down as well, which we like to do out at the park by just putting little dabs of fish oil around. Now, as you're teaching your dog to sniff this, you can start to put it further and further away. And you could cue them to go sniff it out. You could say something like, go search, or you could name that actual smell and teach them how to discriminate between different kinds of smells. So if you had two containers, one with vanilla and one with, say, birch oil, you could teach your dog to target the vanilla to the cue vanilla and the birch oil to the cue birch. And we teach that the same way we teach blue and yellow. Just keeping in mind that scent travels, and we as humans are kind of scent deficient. We have an olfactory deficiency. We don't smell as much as our dogs do. We could, if we really worked and practiced, sniffing all the items around us. But even then, our brains are not designed to take in as much scent. The dog and their noses are designed to take in lots of scent. They have more scent receptors. They have a larger part of the brain for processing scent. So as we're doing scent work, we want to be cautious that our containers are closed and sealed. Metal tins can work really well for this as well. And we want to acknowledge that wherever we move that object, the scent is going to leave a bit of a trail. So if you're teaching your dog to track a scent, I start by teaching them to sniff it up close. I start to move it further and further away. And I might start to hide the bottle so that it's just the scent that's still there. Maybe it's just the tip of this container. But I think about the locations that I'm in and where I'm putting this and how long I have it open and where I move it around. Because if I move it around and set it open in one location for a while, and then I move it and set it open in another location for a short time, there could be some scent pooling in the old location that the dog is going to be attracted to. Now that can be an extra challenge for them, but I want to make sure first I get a lot of successful repetitions of them finding it really easily, succeeding, feeling really good about themselves before I start to make it more complex. Putting the scent higher up raises the difficulty level. Our dogs are going to be more likely to look down for a scent than to look up for one. So that's going to be a higher level of scent tracking. Now, scent tracking is something that we find a lot of working dogs do. So you have dogs out in the airports sniffing for bombs. You have dogs who sniff out drugs. You have dogs that sniff out bodies. This is a whole class of work for dogs, but we can do it at home to help really give our dogs a job. Because that's what a lot of energetic dogs need. They just need some work to do. And finally, I put on here barn hunt. Barn hunt is another competitive sport you can do with your dog. And barn hunt is where your dog actually sniffs out a live rodent, typically a rat, that's in a sealed container so that the rat is safe. And this is through hay bales out in an actual barn. There are a few places around Michigan where you can do barn hunt, a few in Southeast Michigan, in fact. But if you're in a different location, you could check it out your area by searching for barn hunt. This can be a really, really fun thing to do. Some dogs are naturally inclined to be a ratter. A lot of our terriers will go sniffing out for rats. And this can be one way to go ahead and give your dog that opportunity and that outlet without the risk of another animal actually dying. Oh, and I wanted to show you one thing on here that I didn't mention, which is a snuffle mat. So this is my dog's older snuffle mat. It is made of fleece. This is designed to just hide some treats in, and they have to sniff out and search out the food. So a snuffle mat is a good way to bring your find it games inside. I do recommend finding a snuffle mat that is machine washable. The one I just showed you isn't, and it's kind of dirty. All right, enrichment and puzzle toys, super fun things. So enrichment and puzzle toys are interactive toys that your dog can play with without you there. They can do this on their own. And it simulates natural behaviors. My dog's absolute favorite is what we now call tennis muffins. Tennis muffins is super fun. All you need to do is hide treats in a in a muffin tin, and you can cover those up with tennis balls, and your dog's job is to figure out how to get to the treats. This is surprisingly difficult for a lot of dogs. You would think they'd just pick up the ball with their mouth, but a lot of them don't. They don't recognize that they can with this particular look. So I might start by having just treats in the muffin tins that your dog practices eating out of the muffin tin. And then I might cover it with something easier, like a towel that they have to push aside to get to, before I finally cover it up with an actual tennis ball. The tennis balls are great though, because they fit really nicely into the muffin tin. I want to say tennis tin and muffin balls. Now, towel burritos are a really fun thing. This was actually part of Canine Turbo's your dog's favorite challenge. So you just take some treats, you spread it on a towel, and you roll that into a burrito. Your dog's job is to find a way to get the treats, unrolling this towel. Can be super fun. You will want to supervise your dog just to make sure that they aren't shredding and consuming any bits of the towel. If your dog tends to consume materials or fabrics, then I would check with your vet before doing any activities like these, and probably stick to materials that are less likely to cause blockages than towels. Now, plastic container treat dispensers are also some of my favorites. I have one here that we just made. This was a peanut butter jar. It's empty now, and we have drilled these holes in it. We made this one super easy, so I'm gonna make a mess right now. Food falls out of it when you roll it around. Super easy, because my dog doesn't like to work that hard for things. Your energetic dogs might like to work a little bit harder at things. So you can drill fewer holes in here or smaller holes, so it's a little harder for the food to fall out. But this is a simple at-home treat dispensing toy that your dog can push around and knock around to get food out of. One thing I'll mention is that our interactive toys that require pushing and rolling and chasing can keep arousal up. So if I'm looking to reach that bottom part of the inverted triangle of activity, a food toy that they can do on their own to help them relax, I want to look for more calming enrichment items than a toy that they're going to be knocking and pushing around. Ball pits are super fun. So if you do have a ton of tennis balls around, or if you can get your hands on some of those, the plastic balls that are in kids' ball pits, you can fill up a swimming pool, one of those cheap plastic swimming pools you get at the store, or you can fill up a big cardboard box with the balls and sprinkle treats through it for your dog to sniff out or dig out and find. This can be super fun, does tend to be messy, you're gonna get balls all over the house, but if your dog loves to chase down balls, this can feel like Christmas Day to them. It is super fun to watch dogs do this for the first time. And then enrichment boxes are some of my favorite. So cardboard box, sprinkle some treats in it and a little bit of paper in there that they have to sift through and pull out. Once they're good at that, you can actually close up the box and they're gonna have to figure out how to open it, how to get into it. I do this a lot with my toilet paper rolls or paper towel tubes. You can see in this beautiful photo of all these great enrichment items, these toilet paper rolls in the background. You might think, that's odd, why are there toilet paper rolls out? You can close up an end, put some treats inside the tube, close up the other end, and your dog's job is now to figure out how to get that food out. If you want to make it easier, you could drill holes in here as well. If you want to make it harder, if your dog is really good at getting those treats out, you could take newspaper or brown packing paper and wrap treats up in that, twist it up like candy, and then slide it into the tube. That makes a little bit of a more difficult version of an enrichment box. And then there are also a lot of commercial puzzle toys you can get. There's different ones for you to have your dog knock around. Some of my favorite are just balls that the dog rolls around in order to get the treats out. And you can also find some that look like tabletop games, where your dog has to figure out how to slide or flip certain parts of it to get the food out. For our smart dogs who have been practicing these games for a while, they can learn how to do these really quickly. So if you have a dog who's mastered their toy, one of the things you can do to just make it a little harder is to put it under a towel. Put a towel on top so they have to remove that first. This can baffle your dog. It's extra mental work to figure out how to first get to the toy to then play with the toy. Ice enrichment is also a big one over here at our house. I do lots of ice enrichment with my dog, where we'll just take different treats that she really likes. Right now we have chicken and peas and apples all cut up into ice cube trays, and then we just fill that with water and freeze it. Those ice cubes, she has to crunch, she has to lick to figure out how to get the treats out. To make it more challenging, you can actually take a Tupperware container, fill that with water or even chicken broth, and I like to do just whatever liquid I've boiled the chicken in as opposed to store-bought chicken broth because we want to make sure there's no onions in it. Sprinkle some treats inside, freeze that. All you need to do is run a little water on the outside to pop it out, and you can get a big brick ice cube. That can take a lot longer, and it requires your dog to do something a little different. If they just crunch an ice cube apart, this bigger one, they're not going to be able to crunch quite the same way, so they're going to have to figure out how to lick it, crunch little bits of it. It's a little bit more of a challenge. And then edible chews and licky mats are great ways to help our dogs kind of settle at the end of the day. So thinking again about that inverted pyramid of activity or inverted triangle of activity, the bottom is to try and bring them into a calmer state. And a lot of these food dispensing toys can be really arousing, but licking and chewing and sniffing tend to be more calming. So in the bottom of this picture, you can see this orange mat. It has peanut butter and liver smeared on it. You could freeze that, and then your dog's job is going to be to lick it off. Frozen Kongs are great for this too, filling a Kong and requiring them to lick that out. And then edible chews, anything they can sit down on and chomp. There are all sorts of rawhide alternatives. Some of the vets are actually recommending rawhides again at this point. If you get particular kinds that are US made, where there are lots of regulations on them, I have been experimenting with these after many years of not doing rawhides, but something that your dog can chew on for an extended period of time. You see here in this photo, there's also all these bones smeared in peanut butter and stuffed with treats. These are all prepared for the freezer. So the dogs who are getting these treats are very well practiced at chewing on bones, at licking out treats. And so we're raising the difficulty by freezing these things for them. These can be a great kind of end of the day treat. In fact, with my dog, if she gets a little bit stressed, we give her a licky mat so that she can lay down and lick something. Once she's been able to lick that, she tends to fall asleep because she needed something to bridge the arousal, help her calm down. And these can help the dog self-soothe. Finally, I want to talk about building calm. So this is Janora here in this photo. She's very sleepy and cute. Building calm in our energetic dogs is going to be important, especially as we're around them a lot more for the next couple weeks. So I'd like to capture calm behaviors. When your dog lays down at your feet, feed them a treat. It feels really silly, and it goes against the old adage to let sleeping dogs lie. But what happens is anything we reinforce increases in frequency. So if you give your dog a treat for laying down, yes, in the short term, they're probably going to get up. They're probably going to follow you and say, hey, why did I get that treat? Can I get another treat? Should I sit? How do I get more treats? And so it feels like it's not doing what we want it to. When the dog is following, I tend to just say, oh, hi, how are you doing? Oh, no, I don't have anything more on my body. I only had the one. And I wait for them to offer more calm behavior. When they offer another calm behavior, oh, okay, I guess I'm not getting any more treats, and they go lay down, I quietly go get them a treat. I put that treat between their feet. So that act of being calm, of laying down, is what's earning them the treat. Over time, they offer those behaviors more. And as they start to offer those behaviors more, we can wait a little longer for reinforcing, building a little duration into the behavior. You go lay down for a few seconds, then you get a treat. You go lay down for a minute, then you get a treat. And we build so that our dogs can actually learn to relax. Speaking of relax, there's a really great training protocol out there called Relaxation Protocol. This is by Dr. Karen Overall. And what it is an extended down stay where you practice distractions while your dog is holding a stay. It allows them to practice a calm body position around different exciting things. And I'll send this to you in an email so you have it. But it is a really good one for teaching our dogs how to remain in a relaxed state while there are distractions around. Now, as I'm teaching this, I always keep in mind that my dog is performing a behavior here. So I will also reward calm behaviors such as resting their head during this, or cocking a hip so there's more relaxed. Or if they've been wagging their tail, if their tail stops wagging, I'll reward them. Because a wagging tail is a measure of arousal. If that tail slows down and then stops, the dog is bringing their excitement and their arousal down. So by reinforcing the behaviors that show me the dog is calm, I can build a more relaxed state. And then finally, I just added this in today, implementing nap time. Because we have dogs now who are not used to their people being around all the time, who now have their people around all the time. And it can be harder for them to take a nap if there's a social partner around that they want to hang out with. Think of it like when you have your friends over. If young children have friends over, they're not likely to take an afternoon nap the way they might if they didn't have friends over. So it can be really important for our dogs who used to nap while we're at work, but are now amped up all the time, to have a nap time. If your dog can't do this on your own or on their own, it may be good to have them go practice being in a different room from you. Have them go in the crate with calming enrichment, such as the licky mat or an edible chew. Have them go into your bedroom with something that they can chew on, and give them some time on their own to relax. I do want to make sure that the dog is comfortable being separated during this time. So if you've never had them in a separate space while you're still home, I want to screen for anything like anxiety by setting up a two-way camera system, either with a Wi-Fi camera or by FaceTiming to a tablet with your phone, so you can make sure your dog is actually getting the benefit of a nap out of this, as opposed to just being anxious separated. If your dog is anxious separated from you, you could look for a separation anxiety support group, such as the one we have on Facebook, and learn more about how to help them overcome that anxiety of being separated. But for most dogs, what they really need is a moment alone to just take a nap, to just relax. Now, here I have one last video I want to show you. Here we go. So this is in one of my classes. This is my self-control class, and all of these dogs are very excitable. And I got this quick video just to show all of these dogs relaxing. This was accomplished by rewarding calm behaviors and working on that relaxation protocol. So even for your dogs who tend to be very excited in certain settings, we can teach them to be calm in those environments through a little bit of training. Now we do have a few minutes left here for any questions you have. If there's a particular scenario where you're not sure what to do with your dog, or if there's a particular time where your dog is overexcited and you want some tips on how to calm them down, or what to do when they're in that excited state, feel free to put any questions in the chat box or to raise your hand. I'm going to hang out for the next few minutes just to answer any questions. And thank you all for joining me. It was really, really great. Rachel, I loved your question. I'm happy to answer any other questions that anyone has. And I hope you found something really fun to do with your dog here. So we have a question. Our dog, when he gets overexcited, tends to start jumping and trying to bite us. We have a hard time calming him down. Any advice? Yeah, this is a behavior I am very familiar with. I lived with I think she was about 7 months at the time, a 7-month-old lab mix. And she had this behavior where she would get overexcited and I'd see her pupils dilate. So her eyes would get really big and wide and they'd be these just black holes. And she'd jump up and she'd bite at my shoulders. And she tore a couple shirts and I had a few little bruises. That is what I like to refer to as an arousal burst. So the dog is getting really amped and it probably doesn't actually feel good to the dog at that point either. So they're overexcited and they're trying to self-soothe. And to do that, they're jumping and they're biting at us. To help the dog kind of come down from this, I actually want to try and get ahead of it. So I'm going to look at the scenarios where it tends to occur. So I often will see this happen when somebody walks through a threshold. So if you come down a hallway and into a room, you might see it happen going up and down stairs, or it might happen when you're in wider, more open places, such as in a larger living room or outside. I want to track where it tends to happen. And then what I want to do is I want to set it up so that I'm rewarding any other behavior during that time. And now I'm not actually going to ask the dog for other behaviors. I'm going to just give them food for anything that is not jumping and biting me. So most often what this looks like is I walk into the living room where the dog tends to jump up and bite me, and I have a whole pocket full of dog food, and I'm just dropping dog food on the ground next to me. So the dog comes running towards me and they just find dog food on the ground. And so they eat that dog food and they take another step with me and there's more dog food on the ground. So they're preemptively getting reinforced for having their feet on the ground and their body on the ground and for engaging downwards. Now, if the dog does jump up, because let's be honest, we don't always remember to grab that handful of food. We might accidentally forget our treat pouch on the table over there. And now we're in a position where our dog is jumping and biting. Typically what I will do is I will just step behind a barrier. So either having baby gates around or stepping behind a door. And the reason I will do that is because the dog is biting. So I don't want to just wait it out. I don't want the dog to practice biting me, and that can be very painful. So it's likely that we're going to get upset at the dog if they're practicing that, if they're biting at us. Now, if I'm wearing a big coat or the dog is biting at my shoes and it's not causing me any pain, I will typically just stop, stand very still, and very calmly ask for a different behavior. So I might say, "Can you sit?" And it's not a command, it's a question. Can you do anything else? Because when the dog's in this state, jumping up and biting, it is hard for them to think. They're in a fully aroused state. They're actually working out of the limbic system of their brain. It's kind of referred to as the lizard brain. It's all emotional. It's not thinking. They're not processing a lot of thoughts. And what I want to do is try and switch them into a thinking state of mind, which means I need to activate their prefrontal cortex. So I want them to be calm. I'm going to be very calm. I'm going to try very hard not to be frustrated. I know it can be hard not to be. And I ask them to do a calm behavior. Typically, I'll ask for a sit or a down stay, which means I need to practice those behaviors outside of these moments. So they're really strong behaviors, and the dog is really good at them. I'll ask the dog to sit and stay, and I'll move away from the dog, and I'll go find food for them, and I'll reward them for the behavior they did because they worked really hard to stop jumping and biting. Then I want to redirect them to something else, something you can do. A game of Find It, or maybe a chew that they can work on, something to help them bring down that arousal. Sometimes for young puppies, I'll carry around like a tug toy. So if your puppy is teething, they're jumping up and biting, it can be because their teeth are in pain. So I'll carry around a toy, and in the situations where they would tend to jump up and bite, I will direct them to that toy before they practice the behavior. So it's really important to identify when it tends to happen so we can get ahead of it. So we're not just asking our dog to do behaviors and rewarding them for those behaviors when they jump up and bite. Dogs can learn to jump up and bite because it gets our attention and we tell them to do something, and then they get treats for that. So it becomes a chain of behaviors. Jump up and bite so you can sit, so you can get a treat. If they jump up and bite and I ask them for a behavior, I want to put 8 to 10 seconds between that bite and any reinforcement I give. So you're not going to get treats a second after biting me. I need you to do something else. Calm down, take a moment, then we're going to keep working. You'll get food for your stay. I'll send you over to this licky mat. If you're seeing it a lot and you've been training, so you've been working with your dog, you've been asking them to be calm, it might be worth talking to the vet as well. And I will do this if I've been working for a week or two, I've been getting ahead of the behavior, rewarding with treats, I've been asking for other behaviors, but the dog is still practicing it, or they're practicing it a lot, or I'm seeing it pop up in different situations. It could be that they're suffering from some sort of anxiety, and this is a way they're expressing it. Hey, something's wrong and I don't know what to do. So if you're training and you're working with it and we're calm and we're asking for different behaviors and we're not making progress, it's a good idea to ask the vet. Say, hey, is there something medical going on here? Sometimes dogs are in pain and they're trying to communicate that. So that's a really good question. I hope that response helps. And if you have any more questions about it, feel free to reach out. You can always email me or info@canineturbotraining.com. And we can help you out with that more. But really good question. Like I said, I've seen this a lot of times, and a lot of times a little bit of training, getting ahead of the behavior, we can overcome it together. All right, there's another question here. Now that we're doing much more training and daily enrichment, Cooper's gaining a little weight. Do you have recommendations for healthy treats? Sometimes veggies don't convince him during training. Oh, this is a good one. Yeah, so our energetic dogs, we want to make sure that they stay fit so that they can do the activities we want them to. If you're finding your dog's waistline is expanding, I think about trying to use more of their actual dog food as treats. So if I'm in the house and there's not a lot of distractions, and I'm working on something relatively simple, a piece of kibble can be enough to reinforce the dog. Food itself is reinforcing. So often what I'll do is I'll just measure out the dog's food for the day. Excuse me, that's our 8 o'clock alarm, which actually means we need to put our chickens away. The dog's food can be reinforcing to them. So I'll measure out all the calories they're gonna get for the day. I'll put some of that food down for their dog food, and I'll reserve the rest for training. Now, other things you might try are boiled chicken. It's low in fat and low in salt. If you boil some chicken and then mix it up with their dog food, the dog food will soak up some of the juices of the chicken, so that actually will raise in value. Now, commercial treats or things outside of their actual meals should only be about 10% of their diet. And when we're doing a lot of training, we do use a lot more treats than that. So personally, what I do is I actually get Stella and Chewy's like meal treats, and I'm not a rep for them. This is just the treat that I use. I get their meal treats. So it's actually a dog food, and I use that as treats. And my dog really loves it. It's dehydrated duck, but it's formulated to be a dog food. So when I'm looking at my dog's calories for the day, that is part of what I'm counting when I measure out her food. She's not going to get the full bowl full of dog food that she would get if she didn't have any treats. I'm going to keep in mind that a good portion is going to come from this other food, which is her dog treats. Anything that we add in, we want to make sure we're subtracting out those calories from the kibble. And if we're finding that we're using more of the treats, we might consider drop down on those a little bit, raise the value of our dog's kibble by adding something like chicken broth, or if your dog can't do chicken, you could do beef broth or something like that, so that it soaks up some of those juices and it raises the value of the kibble. Veggies are also great. Veggies and little bits of apple. My dog will work for banana, green peas, green beans. She doesn't like carrots, unfortunately, although carrots are a really good snack, a really good treat for dogs. I read somebody posted a comment in Your Dog's Favorite Training Challenge about cooking the carrots first and cooking them in some broth to raise the value of them, to make them tastier. I thought that was brilliant. I'm sorry I don't know their name. I'd love to give them credit, but that was so smart. I was like, I never thought of that. But yeah, I hope that helps. Something a little bit healthier, a little bit lower in calories. My number one thing is just count the calories. Actually measure out the dog's food so we know how much we're giving them. If our dog is really active, we'll want to give a little more food. My dog tends not to be as active. She is not the poster child for this this presentation, although she is for the building calm part. So we're very tight on the calories we give so that she doesn't expand too much. Well, we are just after 8 o'clock. I know because our chicken alarm went off. If you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to us on our website or at info@canineturbotraining.com. We're putting out lots of different things we can do with your dogs during this kind of strange time in our lives. And so we're happy to help you find fun things for your dog to do.